Hi, it's Sue Stockdale, your host for the Sports 2000 podcast. This series takes you behind the scenes of this British sports car prototype series, giving drivers the chance to compete at some of the UK and Europe's finest circuits every year. I'll be talking to some of the people involved in making it happen, and this time we're talking to two of the drivers from the Duratec Championship, Michael Gibbins and Tom Stoten, who have both been winners of that championship before. Now, as there is quite often a rivalry between them on track, I wanted to also see if this extended to who would get featured first in this podcast episode. So listen in to find out more. Today I'm speaking to Michael Gibbins, who's won many of the Sports 2000 Duratec races, and I'm sure has also been champion at some stage, but he will correct me if I'm wrong there. He's consistently at the front, dicing with Tom Stoten, one of the other drivers that we're featuring today in this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, as you and Tom are both being featured in this episode, a little bit of competitive spirit here, I wanted to know, who do you think I should put in first when I edit this episode?
It's a difficult one, that, isn't it? I think based on the last couple of years, and it's good for my ego, maybe me, but I'm sure it will sound great, whatever happens.
Fantastic. Well, you will be pleased to know that Tom said that you should go first.
Oh dear, so he's just more mature than me, that's what it is.
He said you could go first here and he'll go first on the track.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's a much better answer than what I said.
Now, every time I come and watch a Sports 2000 race, Michael, you do always seem to be at the front of the Duratecs, dicing with Tom and several of the other drivers, of course. What do you think makes you so competitive?
That's an excellent question. I've always been around motorsport and always enjoyed watching and taking part. And I really enjoy the thrill of competing and pushing whatever circumstances to the maximum. And I enjoy winning. That pushes us to go as fast as we can.
Now, you mentioned there that you have always been around motorsport from a young age. What got you into it? Did your family have an interest, or did you watch it on television, or how did it come about that motorsport was your thing?
Yeah, well, Dad was actually racing in Sports 2000 when I was quite young. He was racing in the Pinto Championship in the early 2000s. So my earliest memories of being at racetracks are doing up the wheel nuts and stuff when he was racing. Obviously, follow a lot of motorsport around the world and stuff as well. And it just sort of progressed from there when I got a go-kart for my 8th birthday. And it progressively got bigger and faster from there. Did karting up until I was 16 and then moved into the Pinto Championship. I did a couple of years there and then moved into what we are now in the Duratec Championship.
So are you driving faster than your dad was when he was in Pinto?
Obviously, I'm going to say yes. He likes to think he taught me everything that I know. I would disagree, but you have to ask him.
You mentioned there about karting, and it does seem that karting is a route for many youngsters to get into driving and then obviously to be competitive. What is it that you learn from that experience of karting at a young age that you think helps you now?
I think the racecraft is really valuable. A lot of time you're very close to other people, and a very small mistake can be amplified because everyone is so close. So having a lot of time got it wrong, you learn what to do right in each situation. And I think that helps, especially with multi-class that we are in Sports 2000. Making the right decision when coming up to lap Pintos, it can be a valuable asset. And I think that is something that I've carried across, as well as car control and stuff. Dad would never let me practice when it was raining on wet tyres when we were karting. I'd always have to go out on slicks and just deal with it. And I think that's helped quite a lot with knowing when the car is on the limit and being able to keep it on the limit.
And when you're at that moment and you think, as you said, the car is on the limit, how do you keep going?
I think it's got to be instinct. If you're having to think about it, then it's all happened and it's all gone wrong. So I think if you're going around quickly on the limit, you're relying on your instincts to deal with stuff as it happens. Obviously, you've got to have complete faith that nothing is going to go wrong outside of your control. And you just don't think about that. You're just relying on instincts to get it right.
So it is, I'm hearing it's that kind of cumulative learning, then embedding the habit in your mind that you trust that everything's going to work out right from that young age of karting to nowadays, what you're doing today.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not something you probably ever will stop learning. I feel like last year I drove better than when I first started driving Duratec, or probably the year before. It's just something that you continuously build on and gets better and better.
Now, I'll be asking Tom Stoten the same question, Michael, that, you're both dicing up there at the front very often in those Duratec races. What do you admire about Tom as a driver?
He's very consistent and never really makes any mistakes. You always have to be on it. He never gives you an opportunity to back off or anything like that. which makes him very difficult to beat because especially on those longer races, he looks after tyres very well and he's always quick in that second half of the race. He's very consistent and doesn't make any mistakes. He's always there and you can never really relax when he's close.
So I'm imagining when you're in that situation, how do you think you're going to get past him this year if you find yourself behind him?
I think you have to use like traffic and stuff to your advantage in this sort of racing. There's an element of dirty air behind cars. You can't sit underneath someone particularly easily. So relying on traffic falling away and stuff and then just keeping pressure on. It doesn't sound like a particularly long time, but if it's 25-minute race and you've got continuous pressure from behind, it does start to build up. And I know that because I've been in that situation and eventually something can go wrong. You make a small mistake and that can be your opportunity to make something happen. As I said, Tom's quite good at not making those mistakes.
So it's as much about what's going on in your head and kind of outpsyching the other driver as about car control and skill.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element. When I first started in Duratec, I was always very panicky when there was someone right behind. And that's something that when I was racing Patrick Sherrington at the time, he was very good at, was just sitting there waiting for me to make a mistake. And so it's something I'm a lot better at now and don't get quite so stressed. And if there's someone sitting there, I know you just keep doing the same thing. And there's definitely a factor that you've got to keep calm the entire time. Otherwise, if you get all excited about something, then that's when you miss a braking point or lock a tire or something. And then that's when you have a problem.
So thinking about that idea of keeping calm, I also know you're a qualified ARDS instructor. When you're sitting in the passenger seat and somebody else is driving, what have you learned from that perspective that perhaps is relevant in your racing?
I've learned to see stuff going wrong a lot earlier. And when someone who hasn't necessarily been on a track before gets into a car on a racetrack, doesn't really understand any of the concepts, and they'll do something that would be normal on the road, but completely abnormal on a racetrack, spotting that much earlier, which I guess when you go into a racing situation, spotting cars up ahead doing something, so when you catch them, that you catch them at the right point, or you see they're battling and you pick the right points to overtake and stuff, I think helps. And then I guess staying calm when everything gets a bit excited on in the car, just making sure that you're calming with your words and you get the point across in a few words as possible.
Do you ever want to grab the steering wheel from the person that's driving?
Quite often you do have to. It depends if you're on a generic driving experience day. Quite often you've got people that have never been on a racetrack before. And quite often it can be helpful from the passenger seat, just showing what to do with the wheel and just show when you get the line right, what happens. But obviously if you're with someone that's had quite a lot more track experience on a sort of very different sort of day, then that's generally not helpful and you wouldn't do that.
So coming back to the actual competitive element, when it comes to race day, do you just turn up and drive? Do you get involved in setting up and tweaking the car ahead of time? What's your process for preparation for a race?
The car lives at home with us and me and Dad do pretty much all the work on it. So we do all the prep, the setup and stuff. We take it to the track on whenever we're going. And when we get there, we set it up and then we're responsible for maintaining it at the track. So generally, we're quite busy on race weekends, running around, fixing things that I've broken. So I don't have too much of a ritual or anything I follow because I'm busy doing stuff to the car invariably.
So you roll your sleeves up and get involved in the prep as much as doing the racing too. So you haven't got a big support team there that is doing all that work for you.
No, yeah, it's just me and Dad getting it all ready. Sometimes I have some uni friends that come along to the race meetings, but that's a little bit more difficult in the COVID world.
Now, one of the things that we've heard consistently throughout this podcast series and speaking to others involved in Sports 2000 is the friendliness of the paddock. Would you agree that that's an important facet of Sports 2000, or what's your take on the camaraderie?
Yeah, I think it's excellent. I think it's one of the main draws is that you can spend an entire season fighting with someone, as like me, Tom and Josh did last year, and then go and have a beer together. And I think it's a group of friends as well as competitors, if you like. That's quite a nice element. You're not going away in your little bubble and not speaking to anyone else, and you go away, race and come home. It's a nice big social event as well, which I think it's a nice balance that you've got the competition side of it and that can complement the relationships you have with other people there. And I think that's a massive bonus about Sports 2000 that you wouldn't necessarily get everywhere else.
If any of our listeners are showing up at any of the circuits in the future to watch Sports 2000 races, once that's allowed post-COVID, what number is your car and what colour is it? What should they be looking out for if they see you flying past at the front?
We have number 1 on the car at the moment because we did win. We won the championship last year and the year before. So we're number 1 at the moment, and we have actually got a new car for this year. So this year it's black, grey and blue is the colour scheme. If there's anyone there, come and say hello. I'll try and demonstrate how friendly we are.
And as we look forward to the season, Michael, ahead, all the different circuits that Sports 2000 is going to be at. Is there any favourite that you have?
Calendar this year, my favourite is probably Brown's Grand Prix, and that's probably something that most people would say. I think it's quite popular because that back section is very fast flowing, which works really well in these cars. I really like Thruxton as well, just because I've done so many laps around there, mainly working, but I know it very well and we tend to go quite well there as well. And so I quite enjoy them. And then some of the European stuff we've been to have been really cool, like going to Spa and Hockenheim and stuff. They're really awesome circuits as well. And it's a shame we can't go this year, but they're also favourites of mine.
Do you have any ambitions to drive in other categories in the future?
Yeah, Sports 2000 was something we came into. When I came into it, was like a logical step from where we were because we had a bit of experience and stuff and we had a car and things. We did have the intentions of looking for drives beyond that. The problem basically is money, and it all gets very expensive as soon as you get a big team involved and things like that. So we had a look and we had a bit of a push to get some big sponsors and stuff on board to do things like that, but it didn't happen. So I'm quite enjoying Sports 2000 at the moment, and I'm quite happy to be here for as long as they'll have me.
I guess when you have number one on your car and you're winning the championship, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's been lovely to speak to you today, Michael. I wish you all the best for the upcoming season. And hopefully we'll see you there back at the front again.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hi, it's me again. To let you know that support for this podcast comes from Broadtown Brewery, the microbrewery in Wiltshire with big ambitions. Their diverse assortment of beers range from classic best bitters and hoppy American West Coast IPAs, through to Baltic porters and Belgian triples. Only the best quality ingredients go into their beers, and their close attention to detail ensures that you can drink beers that are full of flavour and true to style. You can have them delivered straight to your doorstep, no matter where you live. So go on over to the website broadtownbrewery.co.uk and make your choice now. Today I'm speaking to Tom Stoten, who's won many of the Sports 2000 races and is consistently at the front of the grid along with Michael Gibbins, another young driver, and they're often dicing on the track, which is really exciting to watch. So Tom, welcome to the podcast, and why do you think you should be the one that's going to be featured first?
Hi, how are you doing? I'll let him win this one, actually. He can be first this time. I don't intend for him to be first very often this year, so he can be first this time.
That's brilliant. You'll be winning on the track and he can win on the podcast.
That's the plan.
Now, every time I come to watch a Sports 2000 race, as I said, you're always at the front. What do you think makes you so competitive, Tom?
I think it's a couple of things, really. I mean, firstly, I think it's the car, the Gunn. It's a brilliant piece of kit, which makes my job a lot easier. And then I think as well, it kind of comes down to prep and just sort of making sure that you're sort of very ready for each event. And I don't mean sort of endless testing or anything like that, but I mean sort of arriving, you're ready to go, the car's prepped, the setup's right, you get out into qualifying full of confidence, basically. And so you sort of start the weekend right, if that makes sense. That really helps because, ultimately it is a competitive championship. So if you start on the back foot, it's quite difficult to recover. If Michael's doing 110s around a circuit and you can do 110s around the circuit, but 3 laps in, you're 5 seconds down because you started 5th and you had to pass a few people, you can't catch him because you're running around at the same pace. I just think it's very important to just be sort of ready to go and kind of hit the ground running, really.
And have you always been competitive?
Yeah, I'm relatively competitive, to be honest. Not about everything. Sometimes I'm quite relaxed, but if I decide that it's something that I want to do well at, then I want to do well at it. I don't want to sort of do it half-baked.
There's nothing like winning, I'm sure. And you've won the Sprint Championship, I know, in 2017 and 2018, and you won the Endurance Championship multiple times. So you know what success feels like, Tom. I'm also wondering, how do you handle failure when you don't win?
I think it depends why. We've had a number of races now where I've finished sort of 2nd, 3rd, something like that. But we've had a really, really good race. And I get out of the car and feel like couldn't really have gone a lot faster. I'm kind of okay with that. I sort of feel that at least I put in a good performance and, we had a lot of fun along the way. Where I get more frustrated is when perhaps I make a silly mistake or whatever it is. And I find that a bit annoying because you also feel like you're kind of letting down everyone that's helping you. So I find that much more frustrating.
I guess what you're saying is when you know there could have been something you could have done differently and
yes.
that didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned the we there, that it's not just you in the car, that there's a team, you've got other people that are supporting you and helping you. And we often see that watching Formula One, that there's such a massive support team around those drivers to help them to be successful. Who is in your support team, Tom, to help you to be successful there on the track?
There's quite a few, actually, to be honest. Gary, that obviously designed and built the car, he's been a huge help now ever since we got the car. And his help is invaluable. So he's hugely important. And to be honest, it's a big part of the reason why the car's so fast. Then sort of beyond that, Tim and Joe, two friends who've been helping for years now. They do so much of the work on the car for me, which is just, as I say, hugely helpful to me. It takes a lot of the sort of pressure off of me as well at the circuit, because I'm not worrying, have I done this, have I done that? They just do it, which makes my life so much easier at the circuit. And Andy Catani as well, he does my engines. I've known Andy again for years and years, like Gary. Again, huge help, but always really reliable. And it sort of kind of all goes back to that preparation point.
So what you're saying is that you're able to focus on preparing you to be at your best when you show up, and the rest of your team are ensuring that your car is ready to go in its tip-top form as well.
Yeah, I find that really helpful, to be honest. And I'm very happy working on the car, and regularly do. It's sort of those moments when everything's happening at once, and it's quite useful to have some decent pairs of hands helping you out, because then you can concentrate on what you've got to do rather than trying to do everything else.
Now, one of the things that we've heard from some of the other guests already on this series is the friendliness of the paddock and those fellow competitors that you're up against. What do you think makes that unique and special, if you think that's an important part of Sports 2000?
I think it's a hugely friendly paddock. I've been involved in Sports 2000 since I was about 10, when my dad was racing. So there's a number of people in the paddock who I've probably known for longer than anyone apart from my family, to be perfectly honest. It's hugely friendly. Everyone helps each other out. Everyone's constantly lending each other bits, to get cars out. And there's sort of real kind of support. There's no sort of secrets, really. People are willing to help each other out in terms of, well, what do you do here? Or what ratios do you run? And, whatever that may be. And I just think it makes a real difference, because it's competitive out on track, but then it's a nice atmosphere in the paddock, so you have a nice weekend. Whereas I know that there's some championships out there where the atmosphere in the paddock is a bit more cutthroat, should we say.
It can be as much fun in the paddock as it is driving out on a circuit at a race weekend.
Yeah, everyone's good friends, to be honest. I'm really good mates with Michael, as a lot of people know, and Josh, loads of the guys, Paul, etc. We're all good friends, and that does make it more enjoyable, actually. Very determined to beat them on track, but at the end of the day, you're all mates.
So they often say, keep your friends close and keep your enemies or your competitors closer. Which brings me on to just one question I want to ask you about Michael Gibbins. As you mentioned that you're perhaps your nemesis sometimes on the track there. What qualities do you admire in him as a driver?
He's incredibly consistent. He's always there. He'll always pull a decent time out of the bag. And he keeps a very cool head. Particularly the last couple of years, he just doesn't make mistakes. And I've had it before where I'm on his tail, at the end of the first lap, and I think, okay, it's a half-hour race. I'll sit here for a bit. If I can't, try and get past, and if I can't get past, that's all right. I'll sit here for a bit, and let's see what happens through the traffic. And the mistake just doesn't come. So then you get to a few laps from the end, and you're like, right, I've really got to try and get past now. And that's a real skill, to be honest, because getting through the traffic is probably one of the harder things that we do, just because there's so much going on. So when you've got a car behind you trying to get past, and then you're also trying to sort of thread your way through other people who are battling in their own race as well, not losing a lot of time is probably the hardest thing. He's really good at that.
You bring up a point there, Tom, about on the circuit where the Duratecs and the Pintos are more often than not out in the same race. So there's in some ways slower cars at some parts on the circuit, the Pintos, and you're in the faster Duratecs in terms of straight line speed. Do you ever see a moment in the future where those races could be separate, that there could be a separate Duratec and a separate Pinto race?
I think it all comes down to numbers, to be honest. We've had it before, and I'm sure we can have it again. As I say, it comes down to numbers, really. I think a grid of 35 cars, even if they're two categories, is better than two grids of 17 and 18, whatever the maths would be there. It doesn't bother me that the grids are combined, to be honest. I think provided everyone's sensible and keeps an eye out, then it's not really an issue.
So part of the fun is negotiating through the traffic on the way around.
Yeah, I quite enjoy it, to be perfectly honest. And it throws another variable into the race as well. It's a difficult skill. And to be perfectly honest, that is what sports car racing is kind of about. And if you look at British GT, they've got GT3, GT4. If you go to Le Mans, you've got the prototypes, you've got the GT cars. And it's kind of no different, really.
So you mentioned some of the other racing categories there, Tom. Do you have ambitions for the future to drive in other categories?
If I won the lottery, there's a number of cars out there that, you'd love to drive. But I think one of the real things about Sports 2000 is the value for money. You can turn up on a test day in the quickest couple of cars there, and you're definitely not spending the most money. And so I think sort of speed for pounds spent is really good. There are cars out there I'd love to drive, but the cost of some of them is 10 times plus what we're spending a year. And so you have to be realistic as well.
We're talking money in our conversation, and I know that your day job is related to finance. I'm wondering if there's any crossover that you see between the skills that you bring to driving your Duratec round a race circuit and all that comes with that, and the skills that you're using in your day job. And maybe just tell us what that day job is.
Yeah, okay. So I work in mergers and acquisitions at an investment bank. I think the main thing really is I'm just used to an environment where there's quite a lot going on. There's sort of pressure from multiple different angles, which in a funny sort of way isn't that different to a sort of three-way battle when you're racing. You've just got a load going on and you just need to make a quick decision and kind of stand by it. That's probably the greatest similarity. I mean, unfortunately, sat at a desk with a spreadsheet in front of you, it's not quite as fun as going racing. So there's only limited similarities there.
Yeah, it does seem like having a cool head and being able to make quick decisions and take in a lot of information and process it is an important part that's relevant in both.
I think that's kind of the key point when you're racing, especially because it is so competitive up the front. And to be honest, you look at this year, it's looking like it's going to be even more competitive, perhaps the most competitive year we've had for a very, very long time. And the races will be won or lost in a couple of moments through that race, whether that's through the back markers or the first couple of laps or whatever it is. And so that's quite similar. There's a lot happening. You make a decision and it all kind of hinges on that.
If any of our listeners is thinking of coming along to one of the circuits to watch you this year, Tom, what's the number of your car? What does it look like? What colour is it? I know they'll think you're going to be up at the front. How else can people spot you in a race?
So it's number 26. We've just had it re-liveried, actually. So Paul Traherne, one of the sort of fellow Gunn drivers, he's always at the front as well. He's actually just done a wrap for me. So the car's now blue and white. It's quite like a reflective blue, actually. So the light catches it and it's like a slightly different colour. So yeah, it's going to be blue and white. Finally departed from the red livery that I've been running for, 4 or 5 years now. So all changed for 2021.
And is there one hope that you would have for this season coming up? Are there any particular circuits you're looking forward to driving at?
Well, my hope is that I win all the races. If I'm honest, I've done it before. I've won. It'd be nice to do that again. More seriously, I just want a really good year of racing. I think you kind of look at who's out this year and it's very possible that we could have a 5-way battle for just about every race. And that would just be brilliant. It's just such good fun when you do that. And then I think in terms of circuits, again, the calendar's pretty good. I do love Brands GP. It's near my house and it's a circuit that we've had a lot of fun at. But then Donington's great as well. A nice fast circuit. Looking forward to all of it.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you well this year. I hope that you do as well as you anticipate. And it's been great speaking to you today, Tom. I'm sure you're giving our listeners a better idea of what it's like to be racing in the Sports 2000 Championship. Thanks very much for your time.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from Tom Stoten and Michael Gibbins about what it's like for them to be up at the front in the Duratec categories. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please spread the word by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and telling your friends about it too. Remember, you can connect with Sports 2000 on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, and we shall put the links to the website in the show notes. In the next episode, I will be talking to Derek Bell, MBE, who is considered to be one of the greatest British racing drivers ever to compete in endurance racing. I hope you will join us then.